Minister of India arrived today to address the first United Nations Conference on the Human Environment.
It is clear that the environmental crisis which is confronting the world will profoundly alter the future destiny of our planet.
1,200 official delegates from 113 nations were in Stockholm for the first international conference on the human environment.
Welcome to South Asian Environment Dialogue, and we all know that we are in front of another World Environment Day, 5th June 2022. And this 5th June, the topic is Only One Earth. And it is also the time when Stockholm meeting, the first of its kind environmental meeting that was globally held in 1972, 5th June onwards, it is completing 50 years. So in a way, the global environmental meeting or deliberation has reached 50 years. What we have got in the last 50 years? Have we really got anything? And at the same time, that the title of this today's program, that is not today's program, but this World Environment Day is Only One Earth. Really, do we have one Earth? Where Africa, Asia, Europe, and America do stay side by side? So that is the kind of discussion point. And I have me one of the best person globally to have to talk about this, Professor Dr. Salimul Haque. Dr. Haque is one of the foremost global scientists working on climate change, also a negotiator in a way that he's an advisor of the least developed countries. He's having an extremely important role to play in the Independent University, ICAD, and so on and so forth. So Dr. Haque is the person to talk about it. And I really don't know, but perhaps out of this 50 years, he might be having fast an experience of about 25, 30 years.
Indeed, yes. I started from 1992, the first Earth
1992.
Summit.
So this program is brought to you by the Climate Channel Canada, along with the Plurals India. And let's go straight down to the point. Professor Haque, Stockholm 50. And also this year's slogan, that the environmental slogan, Only One Earth. Let's first talk about that. I think I have just been back from Stockholm.
Indeed.
I think a few hours back. Where do you stand? 50 years? How you assess the 50 years deliberation?
Thank you, Jayanta. It's always a pleasure to be with you. So you're quite right. I'm now in London, having arrived a few hours ago from Stockholm, where I spent the last few days attending the Stockholm Plus 50 meeting organized by the government of Sweden and the government of Kenya and UNEP to commemorate 50 years of the first environment meeting that was organized by Sweden as well. At that time, Prime Minister Olof Palme and Prime Minister Indira Gandhi from India are the originators of this. So 50 years have passed, and I would say some good things have happened. The issues of environment have been recognized. A number of very important environment treaties have been agreed: the climate treaty, biodiversity treaty, pollution, desertification, and so on. But if we look at the progress in terms of implementing all of those treaties, then progress is not good. In fact, there's a important report produced for the Stockholm Plus 50 by scientists around the world. I had the privilege of being one of them. And we assessed progress along these different environmental lines and treaties, and only 10% has been implemented. That, in my view, is a very bad failure. We cannot claim, where 90% of things have not been done, we cannot claim that we have done something. 10% is not doing something. It is just, touching the surface. So we must acknowledge that we have failed. Now, on the point that you raise, the Only One Earth slogan, as you quite rightly pointed out, is a slogan from 50 years ago. And
Right.
we're still using it. And we are still not practicing it. And so let me give you my take. This is a very personal take on where we have failed to be only one Earth, or see ourselves as being citizens of just one Earth. I think the failure has been in leaving it to the leaders of individual countries. So each of our countries, prime ministers, presidents, environment ministers, have been the ones who come together under the United Nations.
Right.
They've had these treaties on different aspects. They've made agreements in the climate change arena. We are very proud of the Paris Agreement. That was a major breakthrough we made in 2015 in Paris at the 21st Conference of Parties. But then when the leaders go home, after making all these statements and commitments, they don't actually practice what they preach, okay? And so I have now lost faith in the leaders of these countries in actually doing things. They will say things, but they will not do what they say. And we are seeing that now everywhere, all over the world. In fact, with the Ukraine war happening, there is major backtracking on commitments on climate because they need fossils. They're going back to more fossil fuels because they are finding an energy crunch. So leaving it to leaders has been a major, in my view, failure. So then what is the alternative to leaders? The alternative to leaders, in my view, is the next generation, our young people. And
Professor Hawk, sorry to interrupt you, but the next generation doesn't have the implementing power, executive power as per law.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They will inherit all the powers, all right? They are the ones who will have the powers. You and I will not have them for long. We do not have another 50 years. We are not going to be around. Right. They are the ones who will take over, all right? So we must prepare them to rule and act in a very different way from the way we have done, okay? They should not follow our example. Our example is a very bad example for them to follow. And if you listen to the young people, you listen to your own daughter and your son and your nephews and your nieces, they will tell you they know that. They all know that. They say, you guys talk, but you don't do. Greta Thunberg famously says, you know, we do blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. You know, she was in Stockholm, the young people were demonstrating out in the street, and we, the elders, were inside the conference center with our badges and registration. And if you don't get registration, you can't come inside. Restrictions and security and police everywhere. That is absolutely ridiculous. The way that we organize ourselves for the high security, for 2-minute speech by a head of state who's going to come, say something, go away, and not do anything. Completely wrong.
I think absolutely right, Professor Hawk, that you say that you have lost faith in the leaders and the younger generation needs to take it forward. I think absolutely right. But intermediate, now, that can't happen overnight. It has to take a time. It has a process to follow. And in between, we are standing right now in 2022. And if we look at the urgency of the whole thing, the latest AR6 report, IPCC reports, the Working Group 3 reports has clearly said that we need to start acting before 2025. So it's no more future decade, future century. It's all about future month, next minute, next second. So these leaders have to take a call by that time. So what is your intermediate thinking that how we can really trigger this reluctant politicians to act?
I'll give you my ideas of what we can do. You're absolutely right. We must make it happen. The question is how to make it happen and how to make it happen quickly and effectively. So first of all, the time scale. You know, 50 years after Stockholm, another 50 years, this is just too long. Thinking in terms of 2050 or even 2030, still too long. Even thinking about every year we have an annual COP, still too long. You know, once a year we come, we talk, we go, we don't do anything. So what is a valid, more urgent time scale? I'll give you the one that I am very interested in promoting, and that is a weekly time scale. Every Friday, all over the world, the school children, under the banner of Fridays for Future, they come out of school and they organize themselves. In fact, yesterday, Friday, they were on the streets in Stockholm with Greta Thunberg and a number of other young people from all over the world who had traveled to Stockholm. And they all came out in their different countries, in their different towns. I know in Bangladesh, they came out in a number of places. I'm sure they came out in West Bengal and in India as well. These school kids are very well organized, I can tell you. Every Friday, they have a theme, they have an issue, they come out on the streets, they come out in their villages, they come out in wherever they are. They talk to their own politicians, they talk to local politicians, they talk to national politicians. Some national politicians listen to them, most don't. Some give them, we'll give them a 5 minute to listen and then say, okay, now we've heard, now you go away. We will do what we want to do. But at least we need to get their attention, and we need to get this issue of young voices being heard on a matter of urgency every week. And so what we need to now think about doing is, how do we make the politicians accountable to these young people every week? So every week, a politician somewhere must tell them, what have I done last week? Not what I'm going to do 2050,
Absolutely.
2030, but what am I going to do this week, last week, and next week?
Professor, here is a very important point. I'm just loudly thinking out here. You mentioned at the beginning of this discussion that, as per your assessment, 90% of the commitments were not made. And you were also just now proposing a very interesting and innovative way of kind of accounting, a social accounting, weekly social accounting. I'm just taking it further forward. Is it possible? Yes, this young kids and young generation needs to put the pressure every week coming out. Greta Thunberg is leading it throughout the world in a wonderful manner. But how about the scientists like you, also the activists? Can't they have at least a monthly checking, the monthly accounting, and giving a scorecard that this month India scored 5 out of 10, Bangladesh scored 6 out of 10, US scored 0 out of 10, whatever it is. So if that kind of public pressure be built up on the governments, and that can be done at every level of government, central government, UN level, also the state government level. So it will be creating a pressure from the bottom all through. Can this kind of model is possible?
Absolutely. So there are a number of initiatives that have been taken at the scientific level. There's a Stockholm Plus 50 scientific group. There was a big launch of something called Eat Nature and Food Systems, a big new evaluation being done. Then there's the IPCC 7th assessment coming up, special reports coming up. And in all of these scientific endeavors, there's a very, very strong element of bringing in the younger generation of scientists, young scientists, okay? We are now working very much with young scientists in all of these arenas, and in particular, taking a much more short-term action-based approach. Not just saying, this will happen in 50 years' time, or this will happen in 30 years' time. We are taking the approach of, what do we have to do right now? And then who needs to be doing it? And then tracking over time, are they doing it or not doing it? And as you quite rightly said, evaluating and monitoring and tracking who's doing what, either as countries or city mayors or governors of provinces or CEOs of companies as well, and NGOs even. Everybody should be accountable. Everybody should be reporting on what they are doing, and these reports can be collated and analyzed and used, and they need to be a tool not for attacking people for not doing things, but encouraging them to do more. Even the 10% that I mentioned, 10% is not a bad thing. It's better than zero. Now the question is, how do we take from 10 to 20 to 30 to 40%? We need to be finding ways to double and redouble and then redouble again the activities that are being done. So we must recognize good things everywhere, at all scales, in all sectors, in all countries. And that really is the pathway to feeling as if we are all on one earth. What we have failed to do is, we've been in our silos. We sit in our country, we think of our country alone. We sit in our profession, we think of our profession alone. We need to get out of that.
get out of the country syndrome. Now, before I come to the kind of next COP at Egypt, and because this is a very important landmark and important, I think, turn of the world, that in which direction we'll go, towards extinction or towards not extinction. So that will be, I think, will be decided partly by the way we plan to have our Egypt conference. Before that, because it's a World Environment Day, you mentioned it before, that there's only one art. I was checking, 1972 was the year when this COP started. It's not the COP, the whole discourse that
movement.
Stockholm happened. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, India's Prime Minister at that point of time, went, and I think she was one of the few Prime Minister or head of the states in that particular meeting. From 1974, this whole process of World Environment Day started, and the themes and everything came up. From 1974 to 2022, that's 48 years. Out of 48 themes, 9 themes are one word or similar kind of word being used. So it very clearly shows that it is not working. They're just playing with the words. So I think this can't be pushed, that a UN body, it's just simply cannot kind of take the old wording and give it away the entire world to work on. So what do you think about it?
Yes, so one of the, I was invited to give a short speech in one of the sessions in Stockholm, reflecting on the 50 years of Stockholm and saying what we want to do next. So as I mentioned already, I'm repeating what I said there, which is we only have succeeded 10%, 90% we did not. That means we did everything wrong. So whatever we did was wrong. We start with that. Whatever we did not work. We have to do something different. And what can we do that's different? To me, what we can do that's different, and again, I come back to the point I made earlier, is get the younger generation to be different from us. They should not copy us. They should not even listen to us. They should just tell us what we should be doing. And we should be listening.
They should listen to us and then say, this is the wrong way, we'll do the other way.
Exactly. And what I try to instill when I talk to young people, and I love talking to young people, and I talk to a lot of them in Stockholm as well, is that you are the first generation who are really able to think of yourselves as a citizen of planet Earth first, and a citizen of India or Bangladesh or Kenya second. Okay, you are a citizen of planet Earth. And in Stockholm, they came from all over the world. There was a group of Palestinian young people. You know, they managed to get visas and travel several days through Israel to get to Stockholm. But they are there. You know, they are the next generation, and they think of themselves as global citizens. Okay, they are a global citizenry. And I mentioned every Friday they get together. They are organizing themselves, all right? So they are not sitting in their own homeland on their own. They are connecting with each other in ways that you and I, even as adults, we don't know. They're much better at this interconnectivity on an internet than even we are. Okay, so let's learn from them, and let's encourage them, and let's support them.
And let them be really a force to reckon with.
Exactly.
I think not only outside the four walls of our conference, but also within the four walls. I think that's the first thing we need to do, that acknowledge and recognize this force in the global negotiation process. Now, when we talk about kind of global negotiation process, next conference, COP at Egypt, is going to be a landmark COP, because first of all, it's a COP being happening in a developing country, and second, where we are kind of standing right now, and this AR6 report very clearly showing us we need to act right now, and this COP has to do that. So what's your expectation? And more than the expectation, how you would like the whole civil society process to kind of organize themselves to be more stronger during the COP, make them hard at COP? What's your prescription on that?
So my prescription, or rather my expectation, is that the Egyptian government, who are the official hosts of COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, will actually treat it with the seriousness that it deserves. I personally believe that the United Kingdom, who had the presidency of COP26, did not do that. You know, the vulnerable countries went to Glasgow and they demanded that the Glasgow outcome should be called the Glasgow Emergency Climate Pact. In the end, the presidency of the COP called it the Glasgow Climate Pact. The word emergency did not appear. It did not appear in their thinking. It did not appear in their wording. They did not treat it as an emergency. So Egypt has to treat it as an emergency. Now, the good news is Egypt is saying the right things. They are saying they want it to be an action COP, not a talk COP. They want to have action on loss and damage. They want to have action on adaptation. They want to have action on finance, and they want to have action on mitigation as well. Action, not just more agreements. And so I'm hopeful that they'll be able to do that. The final element that I feel is going to be the test, and I hope Egypt will abide by it and encourage it, is the role of civil society. Civil society has played a big role in many of the global agreements, whether they are allowed inside the halls or they shout from outside, doesn't really matter. They must be there. Their presence must be felt. Their words, even if they're shouting from the street, must be heard. And I hope that Egypt will allow civil society, and particularly young people, in particular, focusing on young people as the future, who will not just, shout from the streets, but be at the table to decide what needs to be done and then help implement what needs to be done as well.
But lastly, with COVID still hanging in the air, COVID has been vastly diminished over the last few months, but still the threat is there. And the impact it has created over the last 2 years. So many countries are taking that an example or an alibi not to invest appropriately to the climate thing. I was just doing a report a couple of days back, and based on an UN report, that how the power situation, the RE power situation has gone down during the COVID era and afterwards. So, any impact you feel that COVID will negatively influence the Egypt outcome?
Well, unfortunately, these are apprehensions that we have to take into account. COVID and the post-pandemic recovery, and the Ukraine war as well. These are two, unexpected events that have thrown a spanner in the works. And whatever movement we had, that has been destabilized. But we can't allow it to be destabilized. We have to keep going. We have to keep pushing. And so I'm very hopeful that in COP27, we'll be able to do that. One positive innovation that happened in COP26, and I must give credit to the presidency of COP26, is they did both an in-person and a very largely successful hybrid format. Many people who were not able to travel because of COVID restrictions participated online. Yeah, I was fortunate to get to Glasgow. You were there as well. But a lot of the events that we participated in, side events, the people spoke from abroad. They didn't have to travel to Glasgow. So now this hybrid format is actually quite a useful format. Obviously, being there in person is better, but at least being able to have your say, be in the room and talk to people. We had several of them in Stockholm, in fact, in the last few days. The hybrid format of a meeting now is quite a workable format. A number of people in the room in physical presence, but a number of people who are not there, coming in online and participating in the discussions is now a viable alternative.
Let me try to wind up with something, again, going back to 50 years back. The then Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi famously said about the linking the poverty and the environment. There were many people who supported her view. There were many opposed to the view. But it's a very important thing that I think somehow she mainstreamed the issue of development with the environment. That was the kind of output of this her statement. Now this climate change is again saying the most impacted part of the world and the people are the poor people. So how you see there's the countries like India, Bangladesh, in the many South Asian countries, the African countries to be more, they are being severely impacted. So are you looking at a coalition of these countries who are most vulnerable? Already there are some formal collaboration or coordination, but a major collaboration which can push actually the developed countries to do something more significant?
Absolutely. I think, I believe in my thinking, the 1972 conference hosted by Sweden, then Prime Minister Olof Palme, was actually Indira Gandhi's event, where she linked environment with poverty. Before that, they were two very distinct streams, people working on
I think
poverty
she
and
happened to be the
development, people
only
working
prime
in
minister,
environment.
only head of the state outside Stockholm or rather Sweden to be there in the conference.
Exactly, and her voice mattered, and her vocabulary mattered. You know, she brought the two strands together, which did not exist before that. And ever since then, you know, my work has been very much at the interface of environment and development. I do climate change, but I'm about poor people affected by climate change. All right. So as you quite rightly know. So going forward, I see that as a very big issue and a potential future, but I'll disaggregate the two levels. One is at the level of countries, you know, the governments of these countries. We have the least developed country group. We have various vulnerable country groupings. They work together at government level. But even more importantly, we need the local people at the community level who are being affected. You know, the villages in Sundarbans that you work with and we have been working with for some time now, their voices need to be made more powerful. Right. Their voices are still, even their own governments are not listening to them, by the way. So we need to get their voices both within their own governments, but then at the global level as well. And that still is a challenge for us. And I hope we can do better.
Communicational challenge. There's an interesting communicational challenge. I think I'm just again loudly thinking a mechanism perhaps we worked out where these voices from this remotest of places and also I think the poorest of the places, most vulnerable, should be kind of taken together and being kind of taken forward. I think that's an absolutely wonderful way of looking at the things. But I was just reminding, I was hearing you, in 1972, the Stockholm was done. 1971, Bangladesh was born. So Bangladesh, the very interesting, just it struck my mind that it's just about a year. And Indira Gandhi also played a very important role in the Bangladesh freedom at that point of time. So Bangladesh, in a way, is a child of climate change. It's a whole Bangladesh existence is being mired in climate change. So final point from you, as because you are, wherever you are traveling the world, you are from Bangladesh. And that's in the blood. So how do you think that, because Bangladesh was the chair of the climatically vulnerable countries, now I think just being the chair position has been changed. So how you see this Bangladesh position and in the next COP?
Very good point, Jayanta. You're quite right. You know, we are in Bangladesh, we are celebrating our 50th year of independence and our 50th year as an independent country and involved in many different aspects of global activities. Environment and climate change being one of the most important. And Bangladesh has certainly been one of the countries that has taken environment and climate change very, very seriously. I'm not saying we have solved all the problems, far from that, but we have taken it seriously and we are trying our best to find ways, to find solutions. And one of the things that we have set as a goal for our own country is to become a global leader in tackling climate change, not a follower, no longer a follower. We want to be a leader and we want to share that knowledge with all other countries, including our neighbors in India and in South Asia, but also beyond India and South Asia to the other continents in the South, do South to South knowledge exchange. In fact, in my center in Bangladesh, I very frequently invite and bring people from other vulnerable countries to come and share lessons from Bangladesh. We learn from them. It's a two-way learning. We don't have all the answers. Other people have other answers, but we learn from each other. And I think that bottom-up sharing, knowledge sharing is really very, very valuable and will give dividends in the long run.
Great, Professor Hawk, talking to you. I think it's a wonderful way you have explained. And as you said, that you have been into the front line of climate negotiation, climate discussion, environmental discussion for the last 25, 30 years. Just hope that, yes, we are banking on the young generation to show us the way, but till they take over, this is a transient phase. Till they take over, I think we also need to play our role.
Of course.
Push the governments. And as a very interesting point came out, I think 2 points came out in today's discussion with you. Number one is a frequent accountability by the government at all levels, perhaps panchayat level, perhaps state level, perhaps city level, perhaps the national level. And there may be, I think, independent committees can be formed, not by government, but by the experts like you, also the activists, maybe the media, So taking together and really accounting month-wise what they're doing, what they are not doing, and putting a scorecard at the prominent places. That this month, this city scores 0 out of 10, and that makes impact on the city players, city workers. So that's a very important take. I'm really keen and very
let's work on that.
I hope that if you take this point forward, you can go down the level. That is number one. And number two is the communication challenge. You talked about Sundarban. I think take the people from the remotest part and put their voices together, make it louder, make it stronger, so that it is heard when it matters. That is an issue. So wonderful speaking to Professor Hawk. I will keep on talking. This is just an intermediate phase. We need to keep on talking. But as for today, we conclude here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jayanta. Always a pleasure. Right. Bye-bye.
Birds are allowed to roam. I think Representative
টরন্টো থেকে সবাইকে
কবিতা পাঠ ডেকে
ভালো লাগে What it pays for শহীদ মিনার be heard
places to go in the city.
I play hockey.
Having a good
So what we choose to do